Welcome to the Art of the Referral podcast, where we explore the nuances of mental health referrals to better serve our patients and our communities. I'm your host, Anna O'Brien, a practicing licensed professional counselor and co-founder of Be Well Private Practice Communities and Theravera Care Connection Technologies. I'm passionate about creating a stronger professional community that works together to reduce provider burnout, increase continuity of care, and ultimately improve the lives of people living with mental health challenges. Each week, we dive into a different specialty or supportive tool, bringing you expert interviews, practical advice, and inspiring stories to help you master the art and ethics of referrals. Join us as we navigate the complexities of patient care, enhance our professional skills, and build a more connected, health-conscious community. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. We are here today with Dr. Kibby McMahon. She's the co-founder and CEO of Kula Mind, an AI-powered platform that supports people coping with loved ones' mental illness. She's also the co-host of A Little Help for Our Friends, which is a podcast that gives science-based tips for family and friends of people living with mental illness. Thanks so much for being here, Kibby.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Kibby, how did you get into this topic? What kind of made you passionate about this area?
Yeah, I think it's both personal and professional paths, all kind of like all roads lead to Rome kind of thing. I always kind of come back to this point. I grew up with a mother who had a lot of difficult issues. She immigrated from Hong Kong and had a really tough divorce. So she struggled with alcoholism and depression, a lot of emotion dysregulation. And so I grew up in kind of being like a source of support or caregiver or person, like antagonist. And so that's what got me into psychology. And I did a lot of psychological research and yoga teaching and all that fun stuff. And I ended up at Duke University for my PhD program. And I was specializing in dialectical behavior therapy, which is a therapy for very severely ill people with self-harm, substance use, emotion dysregulation in general. And what we noticed was our patients were getting care with us, but their family members were also struggling a lot. They would be calling us, asking, what do I do? My daughter keeps texting me saying she's going to hurt herself. I can't even focus on work. How can I support her? Also, I'm going nuts. So we had this program at Duke for the loved ones of people with emotion dysregulation. It was like an in-person class, and we taught the science of what emotions and mental health are and gave a lot of skills like how to validate your loved one, how to communicate, how to set boundaries or limits. And it was just such a rewarding experience. It's just really cool to see when you can actually work on the patient's environment and make that supportive, right? So they're not just coming into therapy, learning skills and getting relief and going home and then having the same problems. It's like you're actually changing their lives in like different ways. So that program, my experience with that inspired us launching the podcast in COVID, which was crazy. But we launched the podcast, A Little Help for Our Friends, for the same group, loved ones of people with mental illness or emotions regulation. And that became popular. And it just kind of felt like there's a lot of hunger out there for support for the people around the quote, quote, identified patient, right? So the more I do this work, the more I realize that mental illness is not an individual thing, but it's a community-wide thing. It affects the family, right? So, so long story short, I ended up founding Kula Mind in the past year. That's supposed to help the family members and friends of people with mental illness really apply skills in the moment. So something that we heard from people listening to the podcast or people in the program was that they're like, okay, great. It's so helpful to know what emotions are, how they work, how to validate them in my loved one, how to set boundaries. But when I'm in the moment talking to my loved one and they're like in huge distress, I don't know what to do. All my skills go out the window. So Kula Mind was meant to really add that extra support, like give people skills and support in that moment. like on demand whenever they
Absolutely.
need it.
I love that from my own clinical practice. I've definitely experienced what it's like to try to, be working with someone and notice that there's a lot of interpersonal conflict at home. And it's challenging because in most situations, people's reactions are really coming from a place of wanting to support and help their loved ones. But, when we are really worried or concerned about the safety and health of someone, it sends us into fight or flight mode. And sometimes what we intend to do as support ends up actually exacerbating or causing more friction. And I know a lot of people are just like, just tell me what to do. And it sounds like what your program is doing is really helping do one part psychoeducation of understanding what's happening, and then to kind of giving some really specific ideas about situational scripts or things that you might do to support people in certain situations. And you were saying you kind of applying some CBT, is that correct?
Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapies, especially ones that are what's called like contemporary or third wave CBTs that incorporate mindfulness or acceptance. So we found that that's really helpful to teach loved ones to really accept their loved one as they are, right? Not just lean on they gotta change, but how can I accept what I can accept and do what's in my control? So yeah, I mean, just like giving those skills in the moment, because you're right, like in the moment, I mean, this is the case with all emotional issues. It's like you might know the right thing to do, but then when you're in that moment and it's like fight or flight mode, all your skills go out the window. So it's really difficult.
Yeah. Even right as a trained clinician, because it's family members, right? It's people
Yeah.
that we love. And so it targets something that like really pierces through the heart, and it makes it challenging to separate out. And then we have very personal reactions to family members. So I can totally see the benefit of this. And I'm curious, have you found it to be most effective, like in terms of how you set the platform up and ways in which you kind of offer that support?
Yeah, I mean, we're experimenting now. We're so new that my approach is, hey, this has always been my approach. Figure like just talking to this group, talking to family members, thinking about my own experience or my friend's experience, and thinking like, what do people need? What do they want? That's how the podcast came out. They're like, we want more information. We want to talk about other topics. So I was like, okay, the easiest way is podcast. And for this platform, I paired up with an AI researcher from Duke so we can make digital tools that really respond. One of the things that's so hard in CBT and therapy in general is learning these really great, effective CBT skills, like how to think differently and do things differently. But then to have to personalize it to your own situation is tough, right? Like a good therapist can help you do that. Or if you, sometimes it clicks and it works, but sometimes people go, like, I don't know how to restructure my thoughts. Like, I get the idea, it's pretty simple, but how do I do that when I'm super pissed at my loved one for drinking again, right? So it's really hard to make that leap and to make that adaptation from the science of psychology to like, what am I supposed to do now with my loved one? And AI helps us do that, helps us, you know, take those standard materials and make it applicable to you as an individual.
Oh,
So
that's really neat. So very situational and taking into account the unique situation that's happening. And
yeah.
what are some of the kind of, using that term, mental illness, what are some of the things that you see people needing the most support around? Like you mentioned the drinking, that totally makes sense, right? Because that's a cycle
Mhm.
that can be really challenging for folks. What are other types of situations besides just, run of the mill depression?
Yeah. I think that the people who tend to engage with us the most and need the most help are mostly women of the sandwich generation. Actually, kind of fall into it's people like me who are women in their 30s or 40s who are taking care of kids, taking care of their family members, have parents that might have mental illness themselves, and they're kind of like juggling everyone's needs, right? And it's when the needs are too high, when the needs of someone is just like too great for them to handle. So often is, someone with a kid who has substance use or other kind of like a troubled teen kind of look, right? It's like kids who are like falling apart, who can't handle daily challenges, or parents who are more self-involved than they I don't know, should be, quote, quote, that's a judgment, but just like older parents who have their own mental health issues who tend to try to communicate a lot with a potential client, like needing emotional soothing or get really angry, like high conflict parent relationships. Those are the types that tend to seek support because I think women moms of sandwich generation are really motivated to learn how to support people better, as well as they have this also, like, I know this very well as like a mom too, you have this idea that you're supposed to take care of yourself too, and that you're like, I have 10 million things and demands on me. When am I going to get my nails done? Like, I don't know how to do that. So they tend to seek support through something like us. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's challenging, right? When you get that call from a loved one, where there's this kind of clashing of feelings of one wanting to kind of this instinct to drop everything and show up and be there and coach them through that. And then also in the sandwich generation, like very divided, lots of responsibilities between work and children if you have them. And then that kind of resentment can build, or feeling like your hands are tied and there's no way to win. And we often like kind of swing into high emotions in those situations, right? Of either kind of extremes. So it sounds like what you're talking about is really kind of looking at like, how do I make my support the most effective that it can be and take into account my own boundaries and my own needs so that I can continue to show up consistently, as opposed to kind of throwing myself into trying to support, burning out, and then kind of sending mixed signals to my loved one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just it's just a fact now of our society that some people, some caretakers or people who are responsible for others, the burden is just too high.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too high to have a full-time job and take care of a struggling kid and a spouse with addiction issue. Like, it's just like it's too much for one person to handle on their own. And suddenly people have to be in this position of being like an expert, right? Like, especially if your loved one has gone through something very severe, like they've had a drug overdose or alcohol overdose, and they go into a facility or get a detox, or they might have bipolar disorder, or they harm themselves. Like, when there's like a serious mental illness, the loved one goes into a hospital, learns all about what they have, like learns all of, like
Mm-hmm.
it's all the diagnoses and the words and the terms and treatment options. And then they come home and the parent or loved one, like, just, they don't know what's happening. They're saddled with this huge job of being like essentially like a untrained provider at home, but they have zero training. So
Absolutely.
it's just scary. It's overwhelming. And it just makes sense to turn to professional support to be like, what do I do? And also, I'm tired and I have my own resentment and own feelings. And where do those go?
Yeah, that brings up a good point that I think there's so much meat to explore here, and around when you're working with someone who, has a family member, right? Oftentimes depression runs in the family. So these family members might already be in therapy, support, doing their own work. And then this happens, maybe a crisis situation or whatnot. And I know as a therapist, it can be really challenging because I feel torn and I feel like there's not enough minutes in the session to help support that person in processing their own experience and really honoring what they need in that moment, while also trying to provide them with some tools on how to support their loved one, right? Because ultimately their loved one isn't your client when you're in individual therapy, right? So you don't want to go down that route or road, but it ends up, if it feels like a big piece of the puzzle of like helping that person develop some skills to set themselves up for success in that relationship, does interplay with their own mental health and their own concept of self and the relationship. So, in this podcast, as we talk about referrals, it's interesting because what you're talking about in some ways is more along the lines of coaching, right? It's not so much like therapy in session. And I can see different situations. One where perhaps someone doesn't struggle with mental health and, they're just exasperated and need some tools. But then another situation where maybe offering it as kind of a between sessions support to kind of tackle those skills, right? So that in session, you can really support this person and the little loved one of someone with like just really like entering their own world and not making it about their family member, which often it feels like, right? When we're having someone in the household who struggles with mental health, it can start to feel like everything revolves around that
Yeah.
person.
Is there a question? Sorry.
No, it's okay. Just like validating that really does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
I was like,
Um,
oh. Yeah, I Kula Mind, I'm calling it a coaching program. It's psychoeducation, skill training, but it is more education. Of course, I have my own practice. I have a small practice and I absolutely love therapy, but I do see that there is a need for something other than therapy in this context. I think that if you have a family or a loved one with who's really struggling and then you are struggling to help them, often people go, like, I would go to therapy for that
mhm.
normally, right? Like to get support around that and try to, be like, what do I do? But not all, the you might not always need therapy, right? You might not always need a weekly, 60-minute session that's often very expensive or needs a health insurance. Like a lot of people do. A lot of people with loved ones have like anxiety about their relationship with their loved one, or depression, or burnout, or even trauma symptoms, especially if it's like someone with like self harm or substance use. Like seeing their loved one hurt themselves is very traumatizing. So they might be coping with their own trauma symptoms. However, if it's like, I just need to know what's going on and need some skills how to deal with this, then therapy might not be the best place for that, right? Like a therapist isn't necessarily going to be in the moment when you're talking to someone, reminding you of your, like, what boundaries you want to set. So I definitely think that, love people with loved ones definitely need their own therapy, but there's also other ways to get mental health support.
Yeah. No, that's and I was thinking about that too in terms of like when you are supporting someone, and this specifically happens a lot of times with teens, right? When I was working with teens, the parents would kind of want to know, like, how do I support, right? And often you feel torn because you're the teens therapist and you don't want to, overshare. But this sounds like a nice tool to support them and having like an actionable step of learning and doing things on their own to like support them. Can you share a little more about like how it works? Like, let's say someone wants to join Kula Mind or sign up. Like, what can they expect from the experience?
Yeah. I wanted both one-on-one coaching support and community support. That's something that seems to be very important for family members. I'll call them family members, like potential clients, family members. So when family members would join Kula Mind, it's like a monthly membership. So the idea is it's not just like billed per session. It's kind of like you're in and you get support, like unlimited support. And first, I really get to know what they need, like do an assessment and really understand, is this appropriate for them? Is this a good fit? And also, what are their goals? What does getting better look like? What do they want from their relationship with their loved one? And then I figure out what kind of skills they need or what kind of education they need. And then on the platform, on Kula Mind, I basically assign I call them practices, because the idea is we're all practicing, right? There's no like assignments or whatever. It's just practicing. So they might get information on what their loved one has and how it affects them based on the research. And then I will just assign different practices. Like, you're going to learn meditation this week because you need to get in touch with your feelings more, because you kind of ignore your feelings until the point of burnout. So let's learn how to just be mindful of how you feel. And then let's talk about how to communicate with your loved one, or let's make a safety plan so that when your loved one is in a crisis, you know exactly what to do. You don't have to think on the spot, right? So I just kind of make this custom program of CBT skills and resources for each person, each family member. And then their membership also gets them access to our exclusive community. So there's a mini platform where they could, chat with other people in the same situation, brainstorm, and I also do like group Q&As and webinars. So they get kind of like a full support system.
So when you use the term AI, what do you mean? Like, what does that actually look like, or how does that support what are the AI components and how does it support your tool?
Yeah, I know that AI and mental health is a really hot topic right now. It's also very scary for a lot of people. I am not in the camp of the people who think that AI is going to replace therapists. I mean, this is just from the people we serve and we talk to, is like people want to talk to a person who, so let's just go with that. Like the people feel secure and they want to learn with a person, and that's great. So we use artificial intelligence for the purpose of teaching new information and skills. So it's a tool. Like I think humans and a relationship to a expert who's there to pay attention to your needs and find the resources that make sense for you. I'm going to keep that as a person, me for now. But we're using AI to teach the skills in the same way that I always teach them. For example, we're using large language models, open source large language models, meaning we take a model that can process information and spit out like English language, and can be prompted with like English commands to teach, for example, dear man, the skill from dialectical behavior therapy. I teach the same way every time and I say the same things. So if it's the same thing over and over, I'm just going to automate it with something that can mimic the, talking like a person, or, mimic like delivering some information to the client, like, here's the first step of dear man. Why don't you give it a shot? And then to respond in an interactive way. So I'm not using it to like replace people, but just as a teaching tool.
That's really neat. It makes me think about how like we don't blink an eye of like using AI to pull up a recipe for, how to make a fettuccine Alfredo, right? And so why would we blink an eye? In fact, this actually might be a more powerful tool of getting a really consistently powerful description of how to use a recipe like Dear Man, right? Like it's very prescriptive and research based. So having like that kind of consistent quality control is something that AI can really support. And it sounds like this tool is really built for that and not for the part of like taking over the therapy relationship or anything like that. This is more skill building. So perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mental health crisis, a big part of it is that there's too few of us therapists out there who have this like expert knowledge. So if AI could kind of learn a little bit about, what knowledge and what thinking processes we have and use it to help people, I think that's one way that we can make mental health support a lot more accessible than it is now.
Right. Yeah, it actually allows us, I think, too, to make care more personalized, because I know certainly like, there's in sessions it just doesn't feel like you have enough time. Like you want to spend time like making them feel seen and heard and really validating their experience. And then oftentimes I'll find at the end I'm like trying to jam in some skill building, and it's like there's not enough time to do everything. Yeah, and also like, are you going to remember this during the week? Because I wouldn't, right? Like having something that you can actually like reference and interact with in a more kind of like a Google search, but it's really you get to really control the information as opposed to like sending them down the rabbit hole of Google.
Yeah,
seems powerful.
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
I love that, Dr. Kibby. I mean, it's I mean, I know like AI sometimes gets a really bad rap, within mental health, but this is kind of that perfect situation for using it, right? Because it sounds like it's allowing you to take evidence-based care and personalize it and, use it in a subclinical way where, it's not therapy, but it really does provide people with really personalized education and skill building, in a way that like we rapidly need right now. I mean, with everything going on in the world, I sometimes joke like mental health's a boom business. It's definitely not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Also one of the things I was thinking about is like we are simultaneously often dealing with stressors, right? Like with things going on with the environment, right? Oftentimes we're watching our family member who's struggling with mental health, cope with something where we are simultaneously experiencing it on our own and trying to cope. So I could see how sometimes like it kind of inadvertently, like you're able to, if you don't need therapy, but you could use some support, which I think all of us could at some point in our lives, right? It allows you to build your own skills, but also kind of set that boundary or allow your loved one to, have their own experiences and show up for them while maintaining like your own space for self-care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so if people want to learn more about what you're doing or engage, and I know you said you're early on, and that's how we met, right? As like women founders, clinician founders, and it's so important to get early feedback and community engagement. So if people are looking for a tool, or if clinicians or referring providers want to let their either current clients or family members of clients know, what do you suggest? Where's a good place for them to start?
Yeah, go to our website, kulamind.com, KULAMIND.com. Or you could email me directly, Kibby, KIBBY at kulamind.com. And then we're also on Instagram, Kulamind. Yeah, just reach out to us. I encourage therapists who have, let's say you have a patient who is struggling and you just know that their loved one is trying to help, but is like making it worse, maybe like
Mhm.
there's a lot of fights, a lot of arguments, or they're like really struggling to support your patient with their treatment. This is, you could send them the information too. Or if, yeah, if you come across someone who's like, I'm really stressed out trying to support my husband or my kid, what should I do? Then
Mhm.
also send them to me. So
Oh, that's great. And I love the community aspect too. That's so cool because yeah, it is isolating when you're dealing with something. So
yeah,
it's nice to be able to connect with other people who might be having a similar experience.
I think that was one of the most popular parts of our program at Duke, was just having, because it is isolating, right? If you're an older mom who has like an adult, like a 20 something year old kid, and the kid is maybe has some like really, substance use or severe issues where they're living at home, they're not, you're financially supporting them, and you feel like, oh God, he or she should be out in the world, should be independent, but I'm trying to help them out while they're going through a tough time. The parents could feel really ashamed sometimes, or really just lonely, or like, is this my fault,
Yeah.
or what can I do? So connecting to other people in similar circumstances and sharing ideas, like, hey, this is what I tried with my kid, it seemed to work. And so just, sometimes brainstorming is helpful in getting community around this experience, which unfortunately with social stigma can feel really, you know, shameful in a way.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it can feel so isolating when you're hearing like your friends talk about how their kids, got married or got a new promotion, and your kids maybe living at home or struggling still. And also sometimes it's uncomfortable to like open up about your family members' mental health to other people because it can kind of feel like a boundary issue, and so imagine that having other people who get it, it feels a lot safer and more validating. So I love
Yeah,
that.
it's also so sad that if your loved one has different medical issues, right? Some other kind of disabilities, it's a little bit less stigmatizing to be like, oh, my kid is struggling with, I don't know, seizures or something like that, versus if you say, like, my kid is struggling from psychosis, right? There's unfortunately this stigma still of, it's a, someone can like get over it, or it's your fault or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I find that it's especially lonely to have a loved one with mental illness because of, unfortunately, how society still sees mental health.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks so much for what you're doing, Dr. Kibbe. It's a huge contribution to our field and just society in general. So thanks for taking your experiences and turning something really powerful out of them. So keep up the good work. I'll be cheering you on.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Art of the Referral podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful and valuable. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to help us reach more providers and clinicians like you. Follow us on social media and visit our website for additional resources and updates on upcoming episodes. Until next time, keep mastering the art of referrals and making a difference in patient care. Goodbye.